Dish. We're sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt and JohnnyT-Shirt.com. That's Don Callahan. I'm Tommy Ashley. Don, it's been a while. Has it been 3 weeks? 4
I'm
weeks?
trying to actually figure that out now. Yes, 1 month.
1 month.
The last one I could see, because I'm trying to figure out. I'm going to let you talk while I try to figure out who the MVP was, because I have a name down here, and I'm not sure. I'm just
While you're looking.
Yeah,
So
you fill in the details with everything else.
Yeah, so a lot has gone on since we were here last. A lot of basketball talk. We had some basketball last Wednesday. We had basketball shows, signing day for basketball, and all that. So a lot of things kept Don and I off the airwaves. But if you're an Inside Carolina Premium subscriber and you know about that Johnny T-shirt discount, and that's perfect right now for the Christmas holidays. But if you're an Inside Carolina Premium subscriber, you know Don Callahan has been fast at work with his scoops, with his articles about recruiting, high school recruiting, and now, as the title of this show reflects, the chaos of the portal season. But before we get into that, do you have last month's chat MVP?
Yes, I do. Tar Heel Huddle.
Tar Heel Huddle. If you're listening, Tar Heel Huddle,
it's been a while. Tar Heel Huddle, according to the last, I'm looking. And so the last episode was, I guess, right before Halloween. Can you believe that? And so we had a lot of conversations about, I think our top 5 was something along the lines of scary stuff. And Tar Heel Huddle definitely was heavily involved in the conversation. It was a very lively conversation, just kind of looking back and just kind of reminiscing about it. But yeah, so Tar Heel Huddle's in there. So congratulations, chat MVP from what feels like 3 years ago.
Yeah, hit up Don for your personalized Don Callahan. What's it called? What's the thing where you pay money and people
Cameo?
Yeah. Don will give you a free cameo.
We'll give you a free cameo. You got a birthday coming up?
Birthday, Christmas, anything you need, Don can handle that. So today's top 5, in keeping with the way we like to keep it with the theme of the show, is going to be top 5 portal positions of need for North Carolina. Of course, if you're on the message boards, the premium message boards, you've heard about a few areas there. But we'll go top 5 portal positions of need for North Carolina football coming out of 8-4, ahead of a bowl game, going into 2024.
Can I give people a little bit of helpful hint when they're doing this?
Yeah, whatever it's your show, man.
This is Tommy's show. All right. Can I also mention that I called Tommy on Sunday and he ignored my call and then never called me back? Can I mention that?
I called you back several days later after you texted me.
You did not call me back. You texted me, and I said you ignored my call, and then there was silence again, and so I actually had to call you, and it rang forever, and then you finally answered. Anyway,
I got nothing. Folks,
I'm going to drop it into, because I don't think I can. Yeah, I'm going to drop into the chat a link to the the roster snapshot from the Weekly Scoop a week ago, but it gives you a good little breakdown of the roster, specifically from the view that I think should be taking as far as who was used the most this past season. Obviously, these numbers don't include the NC State game, which occurred this past weekend. But it's still a large enough sample you can see who has been used, who's been starting, and then also obviously mentions guys who have exhausted their eligibility. So you can just kind of look through it real quickly and get an idea of just, what you think. So I am dropping it in there now. There you go. Did that come through?
Not yet. It'll pop up.
Okay.
There it is. Nope. That's Anthony Wade's answer.
I mean, it's from my personal Twitter, my personal YouTube, which I don't really use. Are you able to? Here, I'm going to send it to you, and then you can put it in there. I'm assuming you know how to put it in there, right?
Yeah. Dang, that was quick. Hold on a second. You just want me to copy that link and put it in the
just
chat?
so people can go and look at it. I mean, it's just the last Weekly Scoop.
There it is. I guess folks will have to
Yeah.
cut and
So anyway,
paste
so
that.
go on with your. I know that
Man, you
you have
just
no
take.
idea what you were just talking about before I
I have no
interrupted you.
idea. So let's for some housekeeping things here, before we get too deep into it. We're doing this noon dish today. Don's got a fresh column up on transfer portal stuff and scoop and all that. We're also going to do on December the 20th, we're going to redo our live signing day show where I think, what did we go, 3.5 hours live?
Something like that. Yeah.
We're going to have a marathon. We're going to have Greg Barnes. Hopefully, I can talk John Bowman into taking part. He doesn't think he's needed. He is very much needed.
He is
Don
wanted.
Callahan,
That's
he
even
is
better than being
wanted.
needed. Well, is
Uh,
Greg? So Greg hasn't responded to anything. I know he's like a hot shot now.
Well, he told me he was available. I hope he is, because if me and you got to spend 3.5 hours, that's going to be a lot of Bojangles.
Just-
Stupid. But it will be a long time. So be watching us for a long live
Oh,
stream.
hey, guess what? Good news on that front.
What?
They literally opened a Bojangles within walking distance of my house.
Where
No
in the
lie.
world they put that? Just out in a random
Did you
spot?
know where the that Lowe's is put? I don't know how well you know Holly
I
Springs.
don't know your area.
Yeah,
I don't
well,
go. I turn left into your neighborhood,
Yeah.
and that's the extent of it.
Yeah, so prior to the opening of this Bojangles, which I finally went to for the first time last week, it was either going into Fuquay or going to Apex for the nearest Bojangles, which isn't far. But if you're hungry, it's fast food. By the time I would get home, it usually is cold.
Yep.
But it's piping hot. We're gonna have some piping hot Bojangles on December 20th.
I think we got some Uber Eats Bojangles last
That's
time.
right,
and
we
it was
did,
sitting
we
on your
did.
front porch. Yeah, like $70 worth of Bojangles. All right, let's get into it. So for signing day, just to get that out of the way, Don, the expectation is that all 27 North Carolina commits will sign on or about December 20th. Is that correct, sir?
That is correct.
Is there any caveats to that at this
I-
time, at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, as far as I know, everybody is firm. You never want to assume 100% with anything when you're talking about high school kids in general, and you definitely don't want to assume anything, a couple of weeks before the, before signing period. But I think it's a little different now. I think a lot of coaching staffs are so much more focused on the portal because that takes up so much of the time. This week really, and we'll get into a little bit more, but this week really is more about retention. And then the next couple of weeks is more about, recruiting those guys. And we can go into detail, but it's way different, way more fast paced. So there's not a whole lot of opportunity to kind of steal guys at the last minute, especially if you haven't been recruiting them for a long time. But like I said, you never want to rule anything out because of all the other caveats.
Yeah, absolutely. So if everything goes as according to the expected plan, 27 North Carolina commits from the class of 2024 will sign in December, with a good chunk of those being early enrollees. That's something we can talk about later on. But you mentioned the word retention.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people always think about the transfer portal as a way to get goodies. You also have to keep them. And when it comes to that, sort of without spoiling your scoop, sort of your take on the retention aspect of it. We've heard doom and gloom for a couple years now. I think one guy or a couple guys that left last year were actually factors with their school that they went to. Whether or not they'd have been factors at North Carolina, we'll never know. I guess we'll never know. But as far as this year, there's been a lot of talk about mass exoduses and all that. And you see it all over the country. But your feeling about this transfer portal outward bound for North Carolina?
From what I have gathered, the expectation is that UNC is going to end up holding on to, or at least keeping the majority, if not all, of the guys that they want away from the transfer portal. Obviously, you can't compete with the NFL draft. I mean, UNC would love to hold on to, Drake May, for example, even though he hasn't announced anything yet. But you just can't compete with that. But the portal, UNC certainly can. And, while UNC, Mack has mentioned multiple times about how its NIL game is lagging behind a lot of other schools. There are other reasons for players to stay someplace or go someplace, and from my understanding, UNC has done a really good job and expects to retain the guys that they want to retain. Now, there's going to be departures, or has already been departures, but so far, really, I mean, let me just ask you: of the departures, there's only been a few. Was it Elijah Green, Kamari Morales, Bingley Jones?
Ryan Coe went in earlier today.
Okay, Ryan Coe. What? I mean, how significant have those departures thus far been, in your opinion?
I mean, Elijah Green is just a wonderful young man.
Yes.
An asset far beyond the football field for whatever university he goes to. But he's done his schoolwork and got degrees and all, and he wants to play football. Can't blame him. Obviously, he was good a couple years ago for North Carolina late in the year, but didn't really get much run this year, and rightfully so, because Amarian Hampton was the one that was carrying the lion's share of the load and producing. So that's a tough loss from a holistic standpoint. From a football standpoint, I don't know if it really affects the team as much. Binkley Jones is Mack. KJ Binkley, as Mack likes to call him. I think that's potentially something, but look, let's be honest, and this is the fan base basically on Inside Carolina, is the defensive line has not been good for years.
Well, he hasn't really played.
And he hasn't gotten an opportunity. So that –
and some of that's been injury, but he's been healthy this season. And just
coaching preferences and coaching and all that. So yeah, that's one that's a to be determined, right?
Yeah, well, pulling up the link that you put in the chat for me, thankfully, he's appeared before the NC State game. He's appeared in 3 games with 57 snaps, so it's not like he's impacted the season.
Yeah. So and then Ryan Coe, of course, came in with a lot of expectations, didn't really live up to them, got hurt. On top of that, and so that's not really surprising. It's just sort of the nature of the, you leave Cincinnati, you come to Carolina for 3 or 4 games, get hurt, and then going somewhere else. Kamari Morales, not really surprised, simply because Copenhagen and Nesbitt clearly 1-2 there, and he didn't get as much run, even though going into the season he was the all-time leader or tied for the all-time lead with tight end touchdowns. And my take is this, Don, and you may have a different one, but if somebody comes in, well, first of all, they can go wherever they want under the rules. But from a program standpoint, if somebody comes in and they give you 3 or 4 years and they graduate and they fulfill their duty on the academic side from the scholarship aspect of it, then they can do what they want, whatever betters your person. And I don't blame any kid for that at all, ever. Now, you'd like to see them stick at Carolina, but the nature of it is guys have a finite time to play football.
Mm-hmm.
And they want to play somewhere. Now, where the transfer portal becomes dicey, and then you couple it with NIL, and we've talked about this a lot, is where guys are going to play elsewhere for money and for a lot of money. And I wonder what the value is for certain positions. Everybody's talked about running back. What's the value across the country for running back? Clearly not as high as the value for quarterback. But you look at a guy like Jordan Addison that left Pittsburgh, who would have been a high draft pick no matter what, and goes to USC a couple years ago. Those are the type transfers that I don't like to see.
Mm-hmm.
But again, people are bettering themselves, whether it's financially or situationally, and I can't really blame them. Coaches do it all the time. And so my question to you, coming back to you, to flip it back to you, is what type, and without, you don't have to say specific names, but what type transfers bother you from a sort of a love of the game, the college game aspect of it, if you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, because that's where it kind of is for me, is like you have what you would do in those situations, what you would want your kids to be able to do is to better their situation like you laid out. And from a love of the game situation, I don't like all the movement, but I am cool with it. But I don't know. I mean, I've been watching college football I'm an old man. I'm not as old as Tommy though, but I am old.
Man.
And so I love the,
How old are you?
I am, what is it? I think I'm 28.
You were 28 and 90. If folks
Uh,
saw you and I out and about, they would clearly think you were the older of the two, especially with the cargo shorts and the Reebok or the New Balance old man sneakers.
I do not own New Balance sneakers, but anyway, um, yeah, I love the, the old days where you had your quarterback and then you kind of knew about the backup and the third string guy, and you kind of saw them different moments during the season, and so you had expectations and all of that, and when they would finally get their opportunity, and now it's you just don't know what to expect from year to year, because guys will be passed over because there are going to be someone else is going to be picked up from the portal that's going to play over them, or they might leave before they get an opportunity to show what they can do. So I don't like that aspect of it. I don't like, like you mentioned, with Southern Cal trying to sort of, basically buy a team. I didn't like that too much, but I'm I'm understanding of it, and I'm cool with it. I'm cool with it because I think that's what I would do in those situations also. So I don't hate on it. But yes, from a fan standpoint, it's a little bit different.
Yeah, I was reading our thread on the message board. We've got a poster that is just so anti. I love it. I love people that are passionate, but good gracious, man, there's got to be some balance there. Folks, if you're in here and you didn't hear me earlier, and shout out to the 120 plus. This is going to be a big noon dish. Shout out for you guys for joining us, especially on your Wednesday at noon. Hope lunchtime is doing you well. It is sunny and cold outside,
Oh,
so
it is cold.
maybe that has a few of you in here. If you haven't already done, top five portal needs for North Carolina will be the top five at the end of the show. So I've seen some creative ones. You can go position, you can go position coaches, you can go culture, whatever you want to do. Or if you're Preston from Greensboro, you can do, um, you can top it off with always the funny stuff and the good stuff. So I am marking them. We'll
The
revisit them
Ross
later.
jabs.
So Don, let's talk about position by position, portal
Okay.
primer, and all that. And I guess the number one position that everybody talks about the most is quarterback.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
obviously, North Carolina's been at work at that position.
Yeah, so we touch on this in the weekly scoop, so I won't go into too much detail. And I think if you look at crystal balls, you see that former LSU slash former Texas A&M quarterback Max Johnson is being crystal balled to North Carolina. He's a graduate transfer, so he was able to enter the portal before the window opens on Monday. So he entered on Sunday, I believe. And if you've been reading the weekly scoop, I mean, we go all the way back to the spring where we've been talking about how North Carolina was pretty much, I don't know if we want to say guarantee, but definitely had its eye to the portal for quarterback help, because the expectation was Drake May would depart. Now he hasn't made an announcement yet, so I mean, I don't think you're going to have an argument that, if North Carolina, I mean, yeah, let me just ask you. So hypothetically, Drake May leaves. Do you think North Carolina needs to bring in a quarterback based off
Uh,
of the little that you know about what North Carolina has in that room?
yes, I think it
Okay.
would be a malfeasance, if that's a word in the proper context, in coaching not to bring in an experienced quarterback. Now, who that is, we can debate,
Yeah.
but obviously they've vetted and looked at their options or potential options and gone after the one that they want. But I think, yes, I do like Connor Harrell a lot. I think he could be good. I think at some point he's going to be good, whether it's for North Carolina or not, we'll see. But I think that they needed to bring one in to at least have a full room. Boaz is out. I don't think anybody ever expected Jefferson Boaz to play meaningful snaps at North Carolina. He's another guy that
In the
got his
portal.
education, yeah, and he's
Yeah.
gone to the portal. And you have Tad Hudson, and then you have Michael Merdinger, who'll come in, I guess, in the spring.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. No. He'll
But
come in January.
so he'll come in Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I meant. Well, for spring,
Yes.
and so that would leave you with Harrell, which is redshirt freshman or whatever the COVID years are now. I guess he's not a COVID guy though, but Harrell, Hudson, and Merdinger, so you had to have a body there.
Yeah.
And I think Max Johnson is a guy who's been around. Don, what do you think about this? This is something that's been an interesting debate. Watching people talk about him, his numbers are not superstar numbers, and I think having Howell and Drake May has quite frankly spoiled us all watching quarterback position for North
Yeah, I mean, I
Carolina.
think all of his numbers, though, I mean, his completion percentage is, I think, hovering around 65%. I mean, how much more do you want? Playing in the SEC West,
Yep.
I mean, both of the schools, he was LSU and Texas A&M have to play Alabama every year. And so, he's playing some good defenses, the past, however many seasons it is. So he's going to, the competition in the ACC is going to be far less.
Yeah.
On
It
a
was
week to
funny
week
to me.
basis.
Somebody said, these guys need to drop down a level if they want to play. Well, if you think about it, he
Yeah,
actually is
yeah,
dropping down a little bit of a level. But anyway, I think if it happens, it's a good pickup for North Carolina to have an experienced guy. And Anthony in the chat said the insurance policy. I don't know if it's an insurance policy. It might be the planned starting policy, but either way, you had to get somebody. And I think the bird in the hand is worth more than
yeah.
two in the bush.
And it's not necessarily. I don't think they're going to hand him the job if Drake leaves. I think Connor's going to have an opportunity to compete, which will only bring out the best in Connor. I mean, if nothing else, this pushes Connor a little bit because I don't think, I mean, I guess I don't know how much Tad Hudson has progressed the past year while on campus. So, but because we've only really seen Connor because
Yeah.
Tad hasn't been in a game.
And I know, and people talk about it. Well, if you get so and so, then so and so is going to transfer, and that happens all the time. That talk. If somebody transfers because competition comes in, do you want that person on your roster?
Yeah.
Especially given how the North Carolina program has been lacking in a bunch of areas. Quarterback not being one of them, running back not being one of them. Do you think the assumption is Hampton doesn't go anywhere? Do you think North Carolina's set at running back, given if you had Hampton, if you've got Caleb Hood can get healthy, you've got two freshmen or two young guys that are out there. George Pettaway hadn't made an announcement, but of course he redshirted with that option. What about Carolina's running back room overall, Don?
Yeah, just I mean, Hampton's your neck of the woods, so you would know better than anyone. But yeah, there was tons of speculation on the message board that he was departing. We kind of brought what our sources were telling us in the weekly scoop to check that out. But if we are to assume Hampton stays put, Green's already out, and the other guy who received the most carries was Brooks, and he's he's graduated. So, I think even with Pettaway coming back, Pettaway's, I'm curious in your take on Pettaway because my perception, so correct me if I'm wrong or if we have a differing opinion on this, definitely talented, but never found like a home, like a role within North Carolina's offense at all. And they messed with some stuff. They teased the whole like hybrid running back / receiver sort of thing with him a little bit, but that never really panned out too much. Never seemed to be like a true like all down back. I know he's somebody he could find a place in a home somewhere and excel, but I don't think it's been yet in North Carolina. Am I wrong?
No, you're 100% right. I mean, the thing is it's all about fit. It's especially
Yes.
about fit and opportunity in the
Yes.
pros, but it's the same way in the college level. When I look at a guy like Pettaway, he's sort of a running back they wanted to sort of make into a slot or try to make into a slot. I look at Concepcion for State, who is a receiver that they sort of got
Yeah.
into the running back role, sort of the opposite but a similar type situation.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and who knows what will happen, but I think there's opportunity for that type player, whether it's Pettaway or somebody else, to sort of counter Amarian Hampton. But look, if you've got a guy like Hampton, who is a workhorse and a workload and has shown the ability to catch the ball out of the backfield, you want to rotate guys, but how much do you really want that guy off the field?
I
And
agree, but you do. But running back, particular, it's wear and tear matters.
yes, 100%. And you have to have
Yeah.
somebody to come up and take some of that load off. Um, and so that's where a guy like Petaway or Jordan Louis or um, I don't think Davion Gauss would be a guy as a true freshman, but you've got to have guys that can come in and spell him. But I just don't think that the way North Carolina uses their running back, I don't think there's a ton of carries slash snaps there for anybody
Hmm.
as long as Hampton's in place. And that's the trick, and that's what it's on the coaches, and that's what they try to do is get him on the field in other ways because you have to have your best players on the field. We saw that, when guys are producing, like Kobe Paysauer, nobody would have ever said he was 100% a difference maker going into the season. But when he
Hmm.
got hurt, the offense changed,
Hmm.
and especially with Nate McCullum's issues. So you have to find a way. If you're going to keep guys on the roster that are good enough to play somewhere, then you have to give them an option in Chapel Hill. It's interesting. It's sort of the old puzzle pieces, right? You want your
Hmm.
best 11, but it doesn't work out that way all the time because sometimes the 12th guy may fit better than the 11th, that best
Yes.
11 guy. So,
Well, football is such, is a unique sport in that it doesn't look. I mean, every team is different. Every offense is different. Every defense is different. And the especially in the college level, maybe the pros not so much. The degrees of difference can be pretty large, and so different guys work in different situations, in different schemes, different coaches, that sort of thing. And yeah, and I think that's
yeah,
kind of part of it here.
yeah. But the bottom line is, and we can talk about Porter, and I'm going to skip around. Well, I'm not going to skip, actually. Well, I am going to skip offensive line for right this second because I think the defensive line is a big, gigantic question for Carolina.
So we're going
And
defensive line.
we're going to skip offensive line at the moment
Well, what
because
about wide receiver and tight end? We're gonna skip them too.
we're going to skip all of them because defensive line, whether it's coaching or the coordinator or whatever, has got to be better. But as you mentioned, and as everybody should well know, pretty much everybody on that line could come back.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with that in the portal, Don?
So I think, and this is where the scoop kind of helps kind of lay this out. I think that UNC has got to determine. This is through their own evaluations. They got plenty of coaches in that building who are evaluating this team and this roster, and you got to determine who is a piece you want next year and who you are cool with departing, and you got to make those decisions. And you know, and then the guys you want departing, you want to find, you got to, I guess you got to weigh the fact, okay, this guy might not be where we wanted to be, but can we get better in the portal? So there's a little bit of a gamble involved in some of this. And then also I mean, there's a ton of talent behind it. And I'm talking about, when I say talent, I say guys who are highly ranked recruits. You got Travis Shaw, who, I mean, I think according to now just kind of lay out just some definitions here. I use to determine high contributing underclassmen. I used 200 snaps as kind of the threshold there. And Travis Shaw fell well below that prior to the NC State game. He only had 114 snaps during the season. I mean, this is a 5-star guy that was highly coveted, that was a major coup for North Carolina when they landed him. And could he be better with additional snaps? I know that there's some stuff, conditioning and everything like that that's kind of in play with him, but there's a lot of people who, the more comfortable they become in a situation, the better they play. So when you have a guy who hasn't played a whole lot, relatively speaking, do you really know how good they can be? You brought up Kobe Paysauer earlier. I mean, if Josh Downs doesn't get hurt, how do we view Kobe Paysauer? You know what I mean? I
Yeah,
mean, because no one expected that for him to come in to be such a playmaker when he came in, and he was. And really, I don't want to say you didn't miss Josh Downs because I mean, he's doing big things in the NFL right now, but he was a great replacement. But we never would have known without that injury, because he didn't get the opportunity. And so you do have guys like like Travis. I'm trying to see. I mean, Jahvaree Ritzy's played a bunch, didn't start any games, and then you have some younger guys like Jabron Harvey and Tyler Thompson's probably not. I don't know where he's at from a development standpoint. And you got Malachi Hamrick, who's coming off of injury. So there is definitely some potential back there. So you also have to weigh the fact this is a long-winded way of coming back to the fact that you got to weigh what you have behind, and maybe some of those guys with additional snaps, you might find something.
Well, I guess the $1 million question for North Carolina is, do additional snaps matter if the coaching and development's not worth anything? And
Yeah.
there's that debate, and that's going to be a dynamic this year. It was last year, and it stayed the same, and the results stayed the same for pretty much the whole season. But some Daniel Self in the chat mentions Bo Atkinson. I think Bo Atkinson is a stud and could be really good, high motor guy. But all these guys need coaching and need development and need good coaching and
Bo
correct
Atkinson's
coaching.
it's a good mention.
Yeah, and and Atkinson had played well. You always hear about, and this is usually on the offensive line, Don, and we can transition to the offensive line here. Is you always hear about, well, the good thing, everybody's coming back. And then
So before we go to the offensive line, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, I want to finish my funny quote.
Okay, go ahead, finish your funny quote.
And it can apply to the defensive line too. It's like the good thing, everybody's coming back. What's the bad thing? That everybody's coming back.
Yeah.
So I mean, you've got that dynamic going on, but I think it circles back to coaching and developing talent. Go ahead.
So, as somebody who pays close attention to the defensive line, what is your hope as far as North Carolina improving that group as far, and what they can do? Because there's a lot of options here.
I think they're going to have to ride with what they have in reality, because I think a guy like Jared Verse from Florida State, that came from Albany or somewhere like that, and who's been a monster for them. Those guys, in the days of NIL and all that, I mean, are you going to get a real true difference maker in the portal? Can you get depth? Yes. Can you get a true 100% difference maker in the portal on the lines? That's a tough ask.
I think what North Carolina has been able to get is guys who are FCS or Group of 5 guys who are all conference or maybe even FCS All-American players, but don't have the NFL measurables. And I'm talking about Huzzy. I'm talking about Willie Lampkin, those sort of guys.
Yeah. I think that's where a team like North Carolina has to make their money.
Yes. And that's a lot of evaluation is required for that.
Yep. And I mean, Huzzy was a thing. Like Huzzy, you saw when he went out what it looked like after he went out, and it wasn't great when he was out there, even though he was playing really well. It still takes all 11, but when he left, it was or got hurt, it was catastrophic. So I think that's where North Carolina needs to make its money here. It's always interesting to me when people, and this is fan bases from all over every school, talk about they badmouth their team or their program, and then they wonder why they can't get anybody good in the portal. And I mean, it's like, well, these guys watch and listen too, and I don't think players are as twerked up about certain things as fans get, but for North Carolina to get better in the portal on the line specifically, and maybe even across the board, Don, I think living with guys like Kent State and Middle Tennessee State, East Tennessee State, those type players, is where it's at. What do you think, knowing what you know, covering this stuff all the time?
I mean, I think you're right, because like a Jared Verse, North Carolina probably is not going to have the NIL money to beat out Florida State, Georgia, whoever else would be interested in a player like that. But the players that that those schools kind of stub their nose at, like Huzzy, because he's not the biggest guy, or Lampkin. I think that's where they have to kind of go, and the fans have kind of got to understand that. But if you were to list the transfer portal guys who had the most success, I mean, off the top of my head, unless I'm forgetting someone, we're talking about guys who came from Coastal Carolina, Kent State, and God, where the hell did Huzzy come from again?
East Tennessee State.
East Tennessee State. Mm-hmm. I mean, who else would you say from the portal that was most significant as far as during the season that North Carolina added?
Well, we thought Nate McCullum was going to be, and he went off against Minnesota, I guess, and then he sort of stayed injured and sort of fell off the map. But yeah, I mean, when you look at it,
and
like
even with him, I mean, he's at an ACC school that hasn't been great recently.
I mean, and I need to talk about Johnny T-shirt. Well, let me do that. Let me talk about Johnny T-shirt right fast, and I'm gonna come back and make a point about portal shopping and where the rubber hits the road in that area. But Johnny T-shirt, JohnnyT-shirt.com sponsors this podcast. Friends of you, the Inside Carolina subscriber, 158 of you are in here. 158 of you need to be an Inside Carolina Premium subscriber, and you need to be getting that 10% off discount with Johnny T-shirt. It's Christmas time, folks, and they will get you, whether you go by and see them on Franklin Street or you do it online, they'll get it straight to your door. I mean, we might as well have one of those tubes from Johnny T-shirt to the house, as much as that discount is used in this area. It is worth it. And then you get Don Callahan stuff. You get Sherelle McMillan's basketball stuff. And most importantly, you get Buck Sanders' column, who, if you haven't read Buck Sanders' column today, read it. It is relevant to this discussion and to every North Carolina football discussion. Let the national guys pay the bills. Will be right back. More Noon Dish. Don, it is, 22 minutes to the hour. So we've been talking, and it flies so fast with you.
Yeah, we probably need to speed up with some of these positions.
Yeah, but let me talk about Florida State first.
Okay.
Florida State, Mike Norvell down there, they went all in on the portal last year. And they went all in on the portal and the pocketbook. And they managed to get Fentrell Cypress, Virginia's best player. They already had Verse. They got Keon Coleman, Michigan State's best player. Who else? There's 2 or 3 others. They took the best players off of several teams of similar levels, P5 teams, and turned it into what's looking like a playoff appearance if they can somehow beat Louisville without Jordan Travis. They spent the money, whether it's $5,000, $100,000, or $450,000 or $500,000, to get guys coming to Florida State and doing it. They went all in on football. For North Carolina to be in that situation, it relies on NIL and fans now paying those monies into the pot so it can be distributed. We talked about retention earlier. That matters in that aspect, but it also matters in getting guys. And I think that's where North Carolina has got to step up if they ever want to be that type program. Top 5, top 10, playoff consideration, and that's what we're seeing on a daily basis. Anyway, and I'll say this to end that. I think on the offensive and defensive line, it matters the most because average guys or above average guys in the portal in those positions on the lines are getting paid to go places. And if you want them, you got to pay up, whether it's worth the money or not. If you're going to get those guys, you got to. Anyway, take us where you will, Don.
Yeah, so let's just these positions we can knock out pretty quickly, so we know how much time we have available. Wide receiver, I was actually surprised that just a couple of posters mentioned that as a need, and I pushed back on that in those threads because I look at it and the expectation is that J.J. Jones will return. He started all 12 games this season. Kobe Paceauer, who we talked about, he was injured for of the 5 games he appeared in, he started those games. And I think he's more of a difference maker than what we might believe. And then there is still the chance that Tez Walker returns. And even if he doesn't, you have Chris Culliver, who everyone knows I'm a huge fan of.
Your favorite guy.
Well, for that class, he was my favorite guy. He showed some flashes in the few opportunities that he received. I think with additional reps that he'll show even more. And you're bringing in a wide receiver class that is very talented. Now, we know how it is with true freshmen. They tend to not play as much as you expect. But speaking of guys that I'm a fan of, Jordan Shipp is coming in. So I think that I don't think this is a position group that you need to mess with. There's still Andre Green. I don't want to leave him out. I still think he's very talented. Obviously has some things he needs to work on, but I have faith that he will work on those things. Gavin Blackwell has been there. Oh, and Tayshawn Chapman, another guy who, with Kobe going down, he was a guy who ended up kind of seizing that opportunity and showing what he can do. Your thoughts on wide receiver, on if there is a need in there?
I don't think there's a need. Especially if Tez comes back and he's got a lot to work on. NFL guys that can just run fly routes aren't really there for long. I mean, he's shown the ability to run more different routes and catch balls in traffic and all that. But he needs to prove, A, stay healthy, B, to be able to do it on a consistent basis. And NFL requires a heck of a lot more attention to detail than college does, and I think that's where Walker would benefit for coming back. And look, it doesn't matter who the quarterback is. You've seen receivers.
Who is this quarterback at Kent State?
Exactly. I mean, all you got, if you're a good receiver and you've got a quarterback, a Division I quarterback, they're going to get you the ball and make plays. And it's funny to me that people say teams need an elite quarterback and all. Well, neither Georgia nor Ohio State have elite quarterbacks, and I would argue that Michigan doesn't either. But anyway,
Georgia and I think Michigan have one now, but last couple seasons Georgia did not.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like get the ball where it's supposed to be on time and processed correctly.
Yes.
And that's all that matters. And so I think Tez Walker would benefit. So I don't think they need to go pick up a lot of guys unless they lose somebody unexpectedly. And you didn't even mention you did finally mention Andre Green. I just think that room is something that there's a lot more pressing concerns.
Yes.
Than that.
Yes.
And I don't think for North Carolina to improve that room in the portal, I don't think it's possible given what we've talked about already. And you just need to retention. What next position for you, Don? Secondary?
Let's go tight end just to kind of knock out the, I think, easier positions. Obviously, Morales is gone. Nesbitt, was, we expect, I guess, to come back. Copenhaver can return, although he did walk during senior day. So really, I mean, with those guys, I feel like even if it's just Nesbitt, I mean, this is an offense not too long ago wasn't using the tight end. I know it's a different offense because Chip Lindsey's offense now as opposed to Longo's, but I think especially if Nesbitt is there, and that's the expectation. I haven't heard anything different. I don't think you need anything, and you have some younger guys behind him, but it's a position that you can get by even if you don't have guys, right? I mean, am I wrong?
I mean, you need to have a pass catching tight end, and you need to have a run blocking tight end that can do that as well. And I think Copenhaver, that's where he was. But with Julian Randolph, and he went down.
Yeah, he was injured, I think, the entire season, right? I mean, he was a true freshman, but I think he was injured the entire season, or most of it at least.
Yeah, so it's another position of not of need.
Yeah.
That North Carolina now. Max Johnson has a brother that plays tight end, I believe. So you never know. But just another position that I don't think they need to spend a lot of time on trying to upgrade unless there's just unexpected departures.
Yeah, so we didn't actually finish offensive line, but I think that the most, and I'll hand it off to you, but the most, I'm going to set you up, All right. You have 4 guys who started 7 games or more. Gaynor, Rollin, Montillis, and Barnes. Those guys are gone due to graduation. You do have Pounds come back, who started the last 8 games, I think, and then Willie Lampkins, and that's kind of been the plan that he would be a guy who would. Well, he started a bunch of games. He started all the games he was in, I guess. Anyway, so thoughts on need there at offensive line?
They got to get some bodies here, and you got to get some difference makers bodies. But I just don't know if they can compete with the high level schools to get the high level players. I think Willie Lampkin has been good. He struggled at times later in the season, got some holding calls during the season that were certainly not good for the offense. But your take, I'm gonna flip it back to you simply because how difficult is portal recruiting on the offensive line?
So if you ask coaches, they will probably a lot of them will tell you that offensive line portal recruiting might be the most difficult because everyone's always looking for offensive linemen, and in general, they're just the size requirements and the mobility requirements. That combination for that position, there's just not a whole lot of human beings on this planet that possess that combination. Mm-hmm. And on the football field, compared to quarterback where you only have one guy, you have 5. And so, yeah, I mean, it becomes a position. You talked about the NIL money stuff. It becomes a position that ends up being paid pretty handsomely when you enter the portal. And so I imagine kind of keeping those guys that they have, that they like in the room, even if they haven't played yet or haven't made contributions yet. Keeping those was part of kind of the retention, but it's going to be interesting to see just what's available and who goes where, because the competition is going to be there and the prices are going to be high. So North Carolina is going to have to really trust its evaluations and probably going to have to dig into the group of 5 and FCS levels as we talked about earlier.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it, and the difference in high school offensive line recruiting and portal offensive line recruiting, high school offensive line recruiting is a crapshoot because you don't know how guys are going to develop, and it's tough to know what a sophomore and junior in high school is going to look like as a sophomore and junior in college. But when they're in the portal and they've been playing on college, people know.
Yeah, you have a better idea. Point, absolutely.
You have a better idea, so therefore you know what you're getting. Therefore, you will pay for what you're getting. And I think that's an interesting thing. Anthony Wade mentioned Zach Rice. We'll see. It's one thing to have the size and the weight and all that and the height. It's another thing to have everything else that comes with it. I was talking to a former offensive lineman before the state game, and I was like, I've never met one of y'all dudes that was a nice guy. And he was like, what are you talking about? We're all nice. I was like, not between the lines. I mean, offensive linemen are nasty, and they're built differently, and a lot of it is development, but a lot of it is mindset as well. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's going to be an interesting spot for North Carolina because clearly they need 1 or 2 out of the portal that can play. Otherwise, you're going to be relying on guys that have not played because, as with other positions, but this is more understandable, they don't rotate on the offensive line much. So you don't have a freshman getting a ton of snaps to get reps, especially not the way North Carolina plays and rarely plays a blowout game where guys can get in late. So guys like Rice, if he's around, guys like Travion Green and all those guys, you think about it, Willie Lampkin, Diego Pounds are the only 2 offensive linemen on the roster right now that have multiple game snaps or multiple starts and all that. And think about it, Don. Think about how many starts Barnes, Montillis, Corey Gaynor, and all those guys. Carolina has forever had a very experienced offensive line.
Yeah.
Whether they were good or not, folks can debate that.
Yeah.
But as far as experience, Carolina's had that in spades over the last several years. Next year they will not, unless for some reason they land 2 or 3, studs out of the portal.
And I think it is important to mention like RJ Grigsby the coaching staff was praising him a bunch ever since he arrived last January, but he did get injured. Didn't play a ton, but so there's potential there. Another guy you mentioned, Travion Green, who, I mean, nobody played a ton unless they were a starter. That's the unfortunate thing, and you wish Mack has kind of preached this, but they've never really kind of come through with getting some of these guys reps. But yeah, I mean, so there's some guys who you've heard good things about. There's some guys who are highly ranked recruits. I mean, we talk about Zach Rice a bunch. You mentioned him, but also Eli Sutton was a 4-star guy. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting. I think this is going to be the position that's going to be the most interesting to follow, not just with the portal, but even into the spring to see what kind of transpires. You ready for the next position?
Well, let me say this about
Sure.
the offensive line too: is Carolina needs some continuity in the coaching staff on offensive line, and I'm not sure
Yes.
they
Yeah.
haven't had it, and I'm not sure they're going to have it, and so that is a factor there as well,
Mm-hmm.
because you don't just change coaches and everything's perfect. The best teams or the teams with offensive line coaches have been there a while.
Yeah.
And while you have experience and a bunch of starts, if you've had it under 3 or 4 different coaches, it's hard to figure out what the hell you're doing day to day, week to week, year to year, because it changes. Certainly, you block and you pass block and you run block, but different coaches do different things. So that is a big part of this too as well. So next position.
Yeah. So let me ask this question, and we have 2 more positions. So we still have to go over the top 5. So one word, or maybe a couple words. Assume, this is from Anthony Wade, assume Lampkin moves to center, ?
I would think so.
Okay.
Unless they get a portal center, unless there's somebody on the roster that I'm not aware of that can play center. My only concern for Lampkin at center is his size, and I don't know if it matters as much. I don't know how the size factor matters at center.
I think it matters less than guard. And
Yeah.
he's,
But yeah, so that's going to be an aspect of it. But Willie Lampkin's a dog, and everybody
Yeah.
knows what I think about that. That dude, one of the favorite things, we interviewed him before the season for the Hills for Life, and he was like, I ain't got no friends out there, and I'm not trying to make them. And he plays like it. And as he continues to get stronger and to get a little bigger on this level, I think he's going to be a nasty guy. But yeah, he can play center. He did it at Coastal, and he did it really well at that level. So I don't see why he can't make that transition. Excuse me.
All right, let's really quickly with linebacker. This was another position someone brought up asking if North Carolina was going to look at linebacker. You got Power Eccles returning. North Carolina only plays 2 linebackers, and among the true freshmen, Omari Campbell was the one who played the most. And so clearly, and Mack brought him up multiple times. Michael Short was another true freshman. There was only, I think, 4 or 5 true freshmen who burned their red shirts, and Campbell and Short were 2 of them. Short was mostly for special teams, but clearly, if you're playing a bunch of special teams, the coaching staff feels like you're a playmaker. So obviously, he's in the conversation here. Sebastian Cheeks, before he was injured during his true freshman season 2 years ago, he flashed a bunch of potential. So I think you got to like just the options you have to kind of pair with Power Eccles between Campbell, Short, Cheeks. I think Lavallee is a really good player also. And then the linebackers they're bringing in, they might not be super highly ranked, but I think, there is definitely potential there for one of these guys, if not all of them, to be really good players. Evan Bennett, Cruz Law, Ashton Woods. Ashton Woods has been dominating on one of the best defenses in Georgia high school football this season. They're undefeated. They're blowing really good teams out, and he's their leading tackler. So don't be surprised if he ends up being a guy kind of similar to Campbell, who ends up playing a bunch as a true freshman. But Bennett and Law also are guys who are just do everything guys for their team. So I think linebacker, if it were me, is a position I wouldn't mess with at all. You have power, and then you just kind of see where things kind of fall with these other guys next to him.
Well, I think I agree with you assuming that they just play 2 next year and that there's not some shift in
That's
defensive
true. I
philosophy.
didn't consider that.
Yeah, so you could have, you go back to
But I
old
think
4-3.
nowadays in college football, I think most coaches have moved away from the 3 linebackers, so they can get an extra DB out there.
Yeah, we know how somebody loves nickel in Chapel Hill at the moment. But yes, I think Amari Campbell's a starter next year, unless
I
something
agree.
drastic
Yeah.
changes. I think if Power Eccles is there, I think they're your 2 starters. And you're right, they've got some depth. It'd be interesting to see if they can keep everybody in that room.
Yeah.
Given Cedric Gray played almost 2,000 snaps
Yeah.
the last 2 years.
Insane.
That is the definition of insanity. And I know the young man never wants to come off the field, and I get it. But at some point, somebody's got to say, get over here and sit down for a minute. And that's just,
And he played a bunch of special teams.
Yeah. That's a testament. If I'm an NFL team and I want to invest money on somebody who I know is going to be out there and not be on the IR or whatever, that young man played that many snaps, and the only time he came off the field is when he got poked in the face and hit in the gut this year, and didn't miss hardly any time. Just a stud.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think linebacker is a good spot to stay pat at. Like I said, you're going to have to spend money somewhere. It doesn't need to be at places that you can get it done. It needs to be at the other 2 places we talked about. Defensive backfield, I guess, is the last area.
Yeah, and this gets a little interesting because of the fact that you lose a lot to graduation with Biggers, Chapman, and Allen, Derek Allen, that is. But a lot of experience coming back with Marcus Allen, Elijah Huzzie, Tayon Holloway, DJ Jones, Stick Lane. I mean, obviously these guys could something could happen with any of these guys. Will Hardy also is a guy who played a lot. I mentioned earlier about Michael Short playing so much special teams that he burned his red shirt. Caleb Koss is another guy who kind of falls in that category. So clearly the staff sees some ability in him. So, typically that kind of eventually transitions to playing time on defense or offense. But, let me just ask you. There is the experience depth here. Even with that in mind, do you think that they still kind of have to go to the portal?
You got to get a safety. You need to get a high level safety out of the portal. I think best case scenario, Huzzie, Holloway, and Marcus Allen are your 3 corners.
Okay.
And
I forgot DeAndre Boykins, which I'm sorry I'm going to get to.
You would hope Boykins comes back and can play the star position again, nickel star, whatever you want to call it, and he hasn't lost anything because he was never the fastest guy anyway. And then you suffer an injury like that, you hope he's there. But I think you've got to get into the portal and get a stud safety from somewhere, whether it's FCS level, G5 level, or whatever. And I think they start right away. Safety play, and Anthony in the chat hit on it. Safety play absolutely killed this team multiple times, and folks pointed to the defensive line and all, and rightfully so. But safety play, and it's not a knock to the young men; they were doing the best they could do, but it was not good a lot this year. And I think this is where that defense can have a major upgrade through the portal. That is doable through the portal. Is at the safety position. I like Will Hardy. I like Stick Lane, but you've got to have somebody that can come in and be that guy. Because when I watch, and granted, they were subject to get toasted a lot, but when I watch Miami's safeties, whether it's James Williams or Kitchens and all, Kitchens was first team All ACC. If Carolina can get somebody like that at the safety, it cleans up a lot of stuff in front of them. And makes a tremendous difference, because then you don't see a running back running wild. You don't see a slot receiver making somebody miss at the line of scrimmage and then not getting touched. You remember when Jacurius Conley came up, I think it was against Miami, came up and made a play in the backfield right out of the gate against Miami down there. And it was one of those old blank moments. They mean business, and they haven't had that since. So Carolina, Yes, safety I have to put as maybe 3 on my list of major needs in the portal.
Well, that goes into our top 5. So why don't we go into that? What are your 5 positions in order? You don't like to do order, but let me give them to me in order.
Offensive line,
Is that 1?
I would say that's one position.
Okay. Is that number 1?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Defensive line. And the
Is
reason
that 2?
defensive line's 2
Okay.
is because they've got people there that should be better than they are. I think that's the adults in the room. Now,
Well, so then, but do you? So, and this is kind of the question you had earlier. Do you think bringing someone talented in is going to change anything if the assumption is that it has more to do with the adults in the room, sort of thing?
yeah, I mean, I think you bring somebody in at a defensive tackle
Okay.
that can force coaches or give the coaches, whoever they may be, the ability to sit people on the bench who aren't giving max effort.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because I felt like a lot of times, rightly or wrongly, guys were playing because they didn't think they had anybody behind them.
Mm-hmm.
And if you watch Jason Staples' breakdowns, there are some guys on that field that didn't need to be out there in that game. Period. Because coaching or not, there was some awful effort going on. So I think you bring in a defensive tackle that can force guys to either be better or sit. I remember Mack Brown said this about Willie Lampkin, and I thought it was one of the great lines. Willie Lampkin's going to force somebody to be better, or he's going to take their position. And he did.
Mm-hmm.
So I think defensive line's 2.
Okay.
I think safety's 3.
Okay.
I think quarterback's 4, but that may be answered already.
Well, so all right. Let's say hypothetically Drake leaves. Do you still like? So basically, the option is going with what North Carolina currently has or the portal. Do you still think that's 4 compared to the other positions? I'm not saying you're right or wrong. I'm just want to clarify.
I don't know who I'd put it for.
I mean, but I mean, I almost want. Is it 1? Would you put it at 4 though? I'm wondering if it might be higher than 4.
I don't think so because
Okay.
I think you
Fair
can
enough.
I think you can win football games
With Connor.
with an average quarterback
Okay.
or a slightly above average quarterback.
Okay.
Carolina's clearly shown the ability to not win football games with an elite quarterback. But I think good teams show the ability to win quarterbacks. And there is the rub, right? If Carolina couldn't win with Drake May, how are they going to win with Max Johnson or Connor Harrell?
Tennessee couldn't win the national championship with Peyton Manning and won the next year without him.
I know, because they got better elsewhere.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
that's the whole point
Yep.
of my deal is Carolina, for them to win at any level that the fans want them to win, it's a hell of a lot deeper than quarterback. And it starts with offensive line, defensive line, safety, and then I think quarterback. And then I'm not really sure what position I would put after that because I don't know that they need anything else.
Okay.
Maybe corner if Huzzy leaves.
Running back.
I think they're fine at running back
Okay.
unless Hampton leaves. I mean, the 5th position is dependent on retention.
On availability as far as or departures or availability.
Yeah, retention. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, I mean, I don't want to give away too much. Mine was kind of covered. Not that it's very different from yours at all, but it's kind of covered in the scoop that was posted today. I think you're definitely in the right ballpark for sure.
I'll give you that. I'll let you not do that. But if you want to see Don Callahan's list,
typically I give my top 5, but yeah, I mean,
so the order it is on this list is what you think they are.
Kind of. I don't know. Let's see. I don't know if I would go. No, I don't think I did that way. So I would probably shift some things around.
Yeah, and Daniel.
I think I'll say this. Initially convinced me that it's not as important as I initially thought.
I think it's a great reference to you in Tennessee and Peyton Manning.
Yeah.
Peyton Manning's one of the best quarterbacks ever,
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't win anything until he left, and they won with T. Martin.
Mm-hmm.
They won a national championship with T. Martin because the rest of the team got better because a great quarterback can mask a lot,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not going to mask the true issues that show up against really good teams. And I think that is, folks, Don Callahan speaking of knowledge. Daniel in the chat, Huzzy is draft eligible, I believe. So anyway, let me do congruity before I start pulling from the thing
Okay.
and talk about that.
Well, can we give a shout out to our MVP one more, at least one more time?
Tar Heel Huddle, he's been
Tar
an
Heel
MVP. He was MVP last time, and he's working on it this time, and he's agreeing with me a lot. So he knows he knows the game.
Bonus
Let me talk.
brownie points.
Yeah, absolutely. Talk about congruity, their newest sponsor of Inside Carolina. Been a couple months now that we've been doing them. They're North Carolina-based national coverage. They help you grow your small and mid-sized business. So if you're a small and mid-sized business owner, you got to at least give them a shot and see what they can do for you. Go to congruityhr.com/Tar Heels. Fill out the form, get connected to their advisors and their consultants, and see if they can give you a plan to grow that business. They take care of your people, your payroll, your HR while you grow your business. They have the technology, they have the customer service. Darren and Matt have everything they need to help you. And the great thing about what they're doing for Inside Carolina readers and watchers and listeners is it's free. You can go there, you can get set up with them, and they'll give you an assessment. If you like it, great. Roll with it, work out a plan, and all. Or you can just take your free assessment and walk. That's how they do it. That's how impressed they are with their own work. That's how impressed we are with what they do, because we want to give you that opportunity to pair up with Congruity. congruityhr.com/Tar Heels. Top 5 in the chat. Let's go. Anthony Wade. You said it more than once, but I'll put it up here because I don't necessarily disagree. You need a defensive coordinator, a defensive line coach, an offensive line guys, playmakers at safety, boom, what I was talking about, and defensive line players. What do you think, Don?
Yeah, I mean, the defense, the defense has been tough, these past 2 seasons, and
past 2, or does it have been 5? Or
well,
has it been 10? Or has it been since 2009, 2010?
I'd have to go back and really think about this, but yeah, I mean, yeah, it's been tough.
Sean Crawley, a regular safety help, defensive line, offensive line, coaches and more coaches, and internal problems not being addressed. I don't think they sell that in the portal.
Yeah.
Preston, here you go.
Boy.
This will be Don's favorite because he's still in love with a former lover. Cornerback, safety. I don't think cornerback's an issue. Well, he's got it 5th on the list. Safety, defensive line, offensive line, new dating site for a former host of the show. I don't even know all the sites. I don't even want to say anything, get us in trouble. Robbie Mabe. Is it Mabe?
Or maybe.
Maybe. That would be the French version. Good coaching, great motivators. Anybody can follow through with what they say, rotating players in and out of the game. Clock management coach under 40 years old. Great coaching. That's hilarious. John Bowman. New Balance sneakers are cool again, and this is from a young guy.
Yeah, they are cool again. My son owns like 5 of the same pair.
They, yes, I've seen them around this house too as well. I got into the Jordans. I think New Balance is.
Wait, is John a young guy? He's getting old now.
I don't know.
John's in the chat, and he didn't say if he was going to be in person for the stream at all. We were talking about that.
Yeah, if you're in the chat, put some pressure on John to hang out with us for 3.5 hours on.
Well, is John still in there?
He might be. He'll listen to it later. He's a hardcore listener. Anthony Wade, I've already done him. Let's see if anybody else popped up while we were talking.
There was a question that I know you starred. There's a couple questions, actually.
Right there. Will a portal running back to pair with a Marion Signal, a red shirt for Goss?
I think that I mean, if you are playing the odds and you're talking about a true freshman, it's the odds are in favor of them redshirting.
Yep.
Just in general.
Has UNC's approach to the portal told Don anything about how they feel towards Connor Hudson or Connor Harrell and Tad Hudson?
Maybe a little bit, because clearly if it's not a Drake May following Sam Howell situation for certain, but I think that I think it's saying that those guys, I don't want to say they're not ready, because I think there have been situations with with other programs where they brought in a transfer portal guy, and a guy that's already been in the program has won the job. So there is obviously precedent for that to happen, and so it would not shock me if Connor won the job. Would it shock you?
No, it would not. And like I said, there have been some really, really good teams with non-quote unquote elite quarterbacks.
The second question from that you just put up, that's probably, what do you think? Who do you think besides Omarion?
Where are they retaining them from? Going to another school or going pro?
Yeah, I think we got to talk about portal. I think the NFL, like I said, you can't really compete with.
Yeah.
The name that pops in my head immediately is Power Eccles.
Really?
That's just, I mean, I'd have to go and look, just because I feel like everyone would love to add a Power Eccles to their roster. And so I'm sure North Carolina's aware of that. So what do you think?
Well, I mean, it makes sense, but I mean, he's getting literally all the snaps he can handle.
True.
It would be a pure money move and perhaps a championship move if that were an issue. I don't know. I mean, I just think North Carolina, this is where the guys that make a lot of money on roster management up there, and you know them well, have to make their money, is to manage it, but not only don't throw money at, don't waste money.
Yeah.
Because it's not infinite like it is at some other schools. And so you have to weigh, is player A worth 50 times A, or is player B worth more in actuality? Is he going to leave anyway? I mean, it's just, the month of December is freaking ridiculous.
Well, you know what's crazy? Now, I had a conversation with a coach not at North Carolina, not even in the ACC, and they talked about how they actually they broken down like an NFL team would, as far as like, budgeted money for specific positions, starters, that sort of thing. They had it down pretty much to a science, and they wouldn't go over certain numbers for certain guys based off of this, kind of, I don't know, this breakdown that they had.
Yeah. I mean, and for me in the chat, I'm not going to use that word, but if the coaching on that side, on the defensive side of the ball, doesn't significantly improve, it's shown that it doesn't matter who they put out there. I mean, you're still going to have a unit that gets shredded when it matters. So I think that is a big deal. Just a lot going on. That's Don Callahan. This has been the noon dish. Anything left, Don?
So I guess we did touch on everything. Okay.
I don't know of anything else other than decent.
I was surprised that we didn't have more top fives, considering all the people we had.
Well, we did have a large crowd that has been here the whole time. A lot of folks that are paying attention. A lot of folks that are.
Was this the largest that you can recall?
Noon dish live at noon? I think so.
Okay.
It's close to it if it's not, and that's a testament. North Carolina fans say they're going to be out. They're done with football. Look at you guys right here hanging out with Don Callahan and myself.
All right, I have a question. One last question, then we can end on that for you.
All right.
So I know after the NC State game, everyone wanted to blow up the program. I sensed a little bit more positivity, not from everyone, of course, but a little bit more positivity once I kind of laid things out today with the scoop that I put out. Do you feel a little bit more optimistic about where things are headed with North Carolina? I know they're still, considering the fact that there still could be some coaching changes, because I know that's what you probably want more than anything else. But putting that aside, your thoughts, your feelings?
I think there's a lot of work to be done. Look, the offseason's always one in Chapel Hill. I think there's work to be done because now, and I mentioned 2021, they lost a couple games late in the South Carolina bowl game, and then 2022, we all know that, and then now 2023. That's 3 straight years of the same thing. So now I think this group, the coaching staff, this program is working really uphill with the fan base, especially when you consider that, you assume Drake's gone. You don't know if you're going to have an elite quarterback. But even so, even if everybody came back and they started out 6-0, what's everybody going to be thinking?
Yeah, it's going to go downhill. Yeah, because
Yeah. And so Buck nailed it in his column today. Greg has nailed it talking about it. There is a big culture issue in Chapel Hill, and that's a lot to get over in one off season. But I think that there'll be things done, and there'll be people back on the bandwagon, and we'll go from there. Your work. This is one thing, and this is probably not something we can talk about on this podcast and maybe off air. Is I think the divide between how people think things are versus how things really are is very different.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and that leads to there's going to be mass exoduses of players, and there's going to be it's going to be Colorado-esque and that type deal. It's just things are not always how the fanatics think
Yeah,
they are,
you're right.
and that's just the nature of the beast in sports. And
I think people don't realize that you take any player who you think could potentially leave for, the grass is green scenario. Most of them have some sort of emotional tie to that program, and they view it as them, that, when they lost, that's on them. And so not everybody, if you're part of it, if you've ever been a part of a team, most people just don't want to jump ship just for a better situation. They kind of want to, they view it as it's them that did it, and they want to improve on that. You know what I mean? And so I think, yeah, I mean, to your point, the players view the situation way differently than what a fan does.
Yeah.
Most fans do.
And it's an interesting dynamic, but I know one thing's certain. Don Callahan and all of the Inside Carolina staff will be all over it as it unfolds over the next several weeks. Join us. We'll have a noon dish before that, but join us on December 20th at 7 a.m. Something ridiculous. I have to get up at 4:30.
We'll have to get the details. We haven't ironed out the details just yet, but
yeah, we'll be on all morning for North Carolina signing day. Plenty of podcasts. I'll be back doing this later tonight after North Carolina and Tennessee in basketball, doing a post-game podcast, I think, with Greg Barnes. So if you're on this, join us then. I'll throw the link up soon enough. Join Inside Carolina, Taylor, Joey, Rel, Jason Staples especially on the breakdowns. Everything you need for your North Carolina fix, we'll call it that. There is no off-season. There is no crossover season anymore, but there is a portal season and a recruiting season. Don, as always, buddy.
See you, Tommy.
Laters.